Okay, so we already completed how to do the smooth blending, and so now I'm going to show how to do the stipple and the hatching part of this demonstration. I usually use these techniques in portraiture for texture, so I might use stipple or dots if I was going to have someone's hair was really short and really close to their head, or maybe they're wearing a fuzzy sweater, this might work. Or hatching, we typically use for hair, so things like eyelashes, eyebrows, the texture of the lips, and then of course the hair on the top of their head. So for the stipple, we're going to go ahead and use our warm colors. So we're going to grab out our yellows, our oranges, and our reds. And if we want to lighten this even more, we can go ahead and grab out the white. I like to use often represent value. Colors don't have to just be light and dark versions of the same color. You can change color. So if I were going to photocopy these together, I would see that there's variations of different grays on it, which you can see if you look at actually this color wheel that has yellow at the top of it that I printed out for my classes. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is not go like this. This is very unproductive. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to use little marks of dots of color, and so I'm going to use like concentrations of dots, and then I'm going to use fewer and fewer of them as I move out so that it gets darker. And then I'm going to place other dots of other colors kind of in between. I can overlap them if I want to create softer details by side next to, if I want them to be more crisp. I'm going to start to introduce the next color. So there's always 2 to 3 different colors or values, and then I go ahead and add more and more as I go. And if you see a little bit of the paper showing at first, that's okay. Move this down just a little bit here. If I have a little bit of paper showing at first, that's okay. I can always go back in. But I find by kind of wiggling it and making a dot, it's a little bit faster to kind of fill in the space. It also depends on what detail you're working on. If you're working on something really small and delicate, you might want to keep the dots smaller. So I'm using the vermilion or the red orange, right? Always 2 colors at once. And then on the very end, I'm going to use a lot of red with a few vermilion, maybe a few placed into it as well. So I want to make sure that I really go in there and fill it in. So I'm going to go back in after I kind of have like a base and maybe make sure that my highlight is as light as it can be, but also that I'm covering up the paper. Right? Filling in, going over, trying to get gradual transitions. I don't want to see stripes of color. Right? If the orange that I placed in is too dark, I can go ahead and layer that yellow on top of it to lighten it. Just want to be real careful that I don't bring the light and get very dramatic changes of color. Okay, so I really want to kind of sprinkle them in on the end. And then in order to do the sphere, I normally look at my reference, so I look at a photo reference. I'm going to place in the highlight off center, right? So that the light is going to be shining from the top left in. And so I'm going to grab that handout so that you can see it. Okay. I want to be looking at it at the same time that I'm doing this. I'm going to put the shadow in opposite of that highlight. And I'm not outlining it because I want to keep it as a stipple, so that kind of have goals of where the lightest and the darkest places are going to be. And so I'm going to go ahead and start to fill this in, repeating that process that I just used of doing a high concentration when it's one color or value, and then dissipating as I kind of move out. You can see I'm using less and less of it as I go through here. Always using two colors at once, so even in that highlight, I'm going to put some of that lemon yellow. And in this example I have, the light really comes out pretty far on this sphere. So sprinkle a few of these chrome yellows up into it. So you can see I still have some of that paper showing at first. I'm gonna, slowly but surely add more and more. Just want to make sure I have gradual transitions and I have a plan for where I want to place my colors. So I've got that orange red, or the red orange, that vermilion color. I'm going to use a lot of red in the shadow so it's nice and dark. And I can always darken that red by using another color. I like to use like dark green or dark blue, sometimes black, but I normally always cover the red on top of the black if I want to do that to get more of a transition and less dull, because it will get really dull and really dark really fast if I just use the red and the black together. And then I get a little bit lighter here for that reflected light on the very bottom. Okay, so I'm just going to keep going in here and filling this in until that paper is covered. And I want to make sure there's gradual transitions. I don't want to see stripes or rings. I'm going to stop and just kind of bring my example out. So here you can see how I've always used more than two colors at once, and I'm covering up as much of that gray paper as I can in little bits, but you don't want to see it being the same size as the dots that you're working. And so this is an example where the dots are pretty big and pretty concrete, but you can soften them if you needed to just by layering them on top of each other with that oil pastel. You can sort of see here the dots are a lot less crisp because there's a lot more layers there, and it's very soft, and so it depends on what kind of detail you're trying to achieve. I'm going to go ahead and pause here, and then I'll do the hatching.